Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of Flick Connection, where we're going to talk about 10 highly rated hidden gem movies. And I'm doing something I've never done on this channel before. I'm actually ranking them in order of their Rotten Tomatoes score, meaning my number 10 pick on this list, even though it's one of my favorite Western movies of all time, it got an 85 on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's the last pick on this list. My top pick on this list is a prison flick with a 99% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Thanks to Sundays for Dogs for sponsoring another video, but before talking about them and my number 10 pick, I do want to give you one honorable mention that didn't quite deserve to be on this list: Chopper.
Why would I shoot a bloke, bang, and then put him in the bloody car and whiz him off to the hospital at 100 miles an hour? It defeats the purpose of having shot him in the first place. What's more, it's bloody insulting.
Now, the reason I'm including it is because I absolutely love this movie and I was excited to see it included on Tubi and some other places. And even though every single movie on this list is currently free to watch on Tubi, if you don't like Tubi, I'm gonna also list out near the title some other streaming services currently hosting these movies, because I found most of these available on Prime Video and some other streaming services. But this movie features Eric Bana's first performance, and it is a doozy. It's a doozy of a movie and a doozy of a first performance. And it's actually based on the true story of a notorious Australian criminal that went by the name Chopper. And it's from director Andrew Dominic, who would go on to do The Assassination of Jesse James and Killing Them Softly. And don't get me wrong, it's an indie film that kind of meanders and loses its way a little bit. It gets a little bit chatty at times, but I'm telling you, Eric Bana's performance is absolutely amazing. He plays this incredibly hardened criminal, but he's hysterical multiple times throughout the movie.
You got yourself a family now, Jim. Hey, little girl, hello. That's lovely, mate. I don't reckon I could have a family, though. They're the sort of thing that could be used against you, if you know what I mean. No, not like the way it sounded, but you know what I mean.
If you've liked Andrew Dominic's other movies and you're a fan of Eric Bana, this is a must watch, but it's only got a 76% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it didn't really fit this list. I think it deserves much higher. But let's go ahead and move on with one that's got an 85% that I also think deserves one much higher. It's The Proposition, directed by John Hillcoat. This is easily like the best Western created during the 21st century so far. And it doesn't even take place in America. This takes place in the Australian outback. If you know anything about Australia's history, it has a lot in common with American history, and they also had kind of a frontier era, very much like the American West. This movie depicts that beautifully. The Proposition also features just absolutely breathtaking cinematography and some incredible performances. Even some legendary character actors pop up for a scene or two in this movie. And then it's led off by Guy Pearce, probably like a career best for him as well. This is a movie that is like easily one of my favorite on this list, but because of how it's rated on Rotten Tomatoes, it ended up at the back of the list. Next up, we've got a comedy from the UK done in a documentary style. It's titled 24-Hour Party People.
Well, I'm battered, I'm bruised, I've done something rather unfortunate to my coccyx, I'm slightly upset, and I'm utterly elated. I'll definitely be doing it again. This
stars Steve Coogan. If you know anything about him and love his brand of comedy, you have to see this movie if you have not already. I mean, this is classic mockumentary style in the vein of This Is Spinal Tap. I would say it's just about as good as This Is Spinal Tap, but it taps into like the 1990s party culture or club culture. Steve Coogan just plays a buffoon reporter, something he's done a few times in his career. Just a silly, good old-fashioned English comedy that does have a cult following, but it's a small one. And this is one that I don't see available on streaming all the time, but it too is available on a handful of streaming services right now.
I don't want to tell you too much, don't want to spoil the film, but I'll just say Icarus, okay? If you know what I mean, great. If you don't, it doesn't matter. But you should probably read more.
All right, we're only 3 picks into this top 10 list, and we're almost in the 90% range. My next pick has an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it actually stars Steve Martin in a pretty serious role. In fact, I don't think he gets a single laugh in The Spanish Prisoner. Now, The Spanish Prisoner is actually the name of a con game, and this is a con man movie. It actually ends up depicting what the Spanish prisoner con is, but this is also written and directed by David Mamet, who's probably most famous for Glengarry Glen Ross. He also did Wag the Dog. And kind of similar to Aaron Sorkin, he's really great at this sharp dialogue. And The Spanish Prisoner is full of that. You get people talking out of both sides of their mouth where they're meaning two different things, and typical con man thriller style. It's full of twists and turns, like packed with them. Some of them you'll see coming because, you know, this is a movie from 1997, but it's also a David Mamet movie from 1997, and it's got a lot of fantastic elements, particularly the unusually serious performance from Steve Martin. If you like the idea of never running out of good movies to watch, again, definitely consider clicking that subscribe button. And if you're already subscribed, definitely consider leaving a like or a comment. It's a great way of letting the YouTube algorithm know you'd like to see more content like this again in the future. Now, even though The Spanish Prisoner is an American movie, my next pick is a Spanish language movie titled Time Crimes. Now, this is a time travel movie from Spain that is unlike any other time travel movie I've ever seen before, and it's one I have been recommending since I started this channel. In fact, I think it was featured on my first top 10 list, or at least one of my first. And I still strongly recommend it just because of how unique and interesting it is, but it also ends up being a really wild ride, especially about the halfway point. This thing just escalates and becomes chaotic in a very organized way. Everything makes sense, but the time travel paradox that they set up early in the movie just continues to kind of get worse and worse for the main character. And Time Crimes ends up being a Christopher Nolan level mind bender of a movie. Something else that's mind blowing is today's sponsor, Sundays for Dogs. And that's because they actually helped extend the life of our dog Peanut. And that's because Sundays is air-dried dog food that contains 90% human-grade meat, meaning meat that's safe for you and I to eat. The other 10% is vegetables with 0 synthetic ingredients. And because it's air-dried, you just pour it in the bowl like regular kibble. There's no messy prep or cleanup like there can be with other fresh dog food brands. As Peanut was getting older, we noticed that she just stopped digesting the food that we were giving her for years. Food that we thought was good and healthy for her just was not working with her elderly gut, and Sundays immediately changed all that. She was digesting the food better and immediately started putting weight back on. And because Sundays is air dried, it is shelf stable, which means they don't have to spend extra money on refrigeration or ice packs to ship it to you. They're just focused on that short list of premium ingredients, and they pass the savings on to you. Sundays is up to 45% less than other fresh dog food brands, but for a limited time, my viewers will save an additional 50% off their first order with Sundays when they use the link in the description, or just go to sundaysfordogs.com/flick. It's a great deal, and you know you'll be giving your dog better nutrition than basic grocery store food. Again, to get 50% off on top of an already great price, use the link in the video description or just go to sundaysfordogs.com/flick. But speaking of great stuff, let's talk about the rest of these highly rated hidden gems. Woody Harrelson makes the list with an incredible underrated thriller that he did titled Trans-Siberian. In this movie, he and his wife take a trip on the Trans-Siberian Railway where they run into some nefarious characters. And I'll admit, very much like a train, this movie takes a while to get moving. It's a slow build, but once things escalate, again, like a train, this movie's difficult to slow down. It really goes to a breakneck pace. You just have to be patient for really the first half of the film. And it's even got kind of a dark, grungy vibe, but you cannot tell how tense the movie's ultimately going to get based on the first 20 minutes. I literally cannot say much, it'll spoil things, but if you like good old-fashioned nail-biter thrillers, Trans-Siberian is a great one, and it's filled with a lot of great moments. Just don't expect classic Woody Harrelson in this movie, you're not going to get it. Next up, we've got one titled The Hunt that actually has a 92% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and is probably the most serious movie on this list. This movie actually stars Mads Mikkelsen as a man, or rather a teacher, who is accused of molesting a child in his small community. Now, the way that they set this movie up, you are certain from the onset that he is innocent of these accusations, but no one else in the community is. Only you, the viewer, and him as the main character know the truth. And the movie depicts how a community could turn on somebody very quickly based on baseless accusations, basically. And the way that this is all set up makes total sense. It feels like something that could happen to someone, something that could potentially even happen to you or someone that you love. You know that if you knew what the other people in the story knew, you would feel the same way that they do, but you know what he knows. And it's an incredibly interesting intellectual exercise. Like, you're literally on both sides of this issue in the movie because of the way that they set it up. And it's an awful place to be, but the movie handles it all kind of perfectly. Not to mention Mads Mikkelsen leads it off, which kind of just makes the whole thing work. This is mixed language. You are going to have to read subtitles for most of it. But if you like real tense and real serious dramas, The Hunt is an excellent one. Kevin Costner's latest effort, Horizon, not only bombed at the box office, but they delayed part 2 and the other parts that he was planning on making. But apparently Netflix is in talks to maybe revive it or bring it on board and turn it into a series. That said, next up, I've got a Kevin Costner flick that is just completely underrated despite having high ratings, No Way Out. Now, this almost all takes place inside the Pentagon. They actually filmed it in the Pentagon. And it's a total cat and mouse chase. Kevin Costner plays a naval officer who knows that a crooked politician has done something awful. I'm not going to say what just yet, but he has to prove what's going on before he is caught. So Costner's actually running around the Pentagon this entire time trying to duck people chasing him while also piling together evidence. While this is not a Tom Clancy movie, if you like Tom Clancy books and the movie's based on his books, this has a lot in common with them. Not quite as much action as his movies tend to have, but still, it's a tense thriller with a lot of fast-paced elements and kind of a cool throwback vibe as well. Now, next up, I've got just an incredible thriller from Norway that will appeal to a just broad audience, but even though it's in a foreign language, they do have a dubbed version on Tubi and other streaming services. It is worth taking a moment to note that on Tubi, there is a dubbed version and a foreign language version, which means you can't just open the movie and change the audio settings. You actually have to pick the dubbed version if you don't want to read those subtitles. That varies from platform to platform, but keep an eye out for it. But Headhunters actually stars Nicola Coster-Waldau. Most of you know him as Jaime Lannister. But the movie actually revolves around an art thief, or rather a high-powered executive sort of headhunter fellow who steals high-end art on the side. So right off the bat, it's kind of an interesting setup, but when he ends up stealing from the wrong person, this just turns into an insane thriller. Again, you've got someone on the run, but there are so many tense elements in this one, and wild things I've never seen in a movie before. This is just a really well-rounded thriller, packed, and I mean packed with a bunch of surprising moments. Now we're at my number 2 pick, the first and only movie on this list to only be available on Tubi. Do not forget to go check that top pinned comment in order to see the full list of all the movies we've discussed, along with where you can stream them here in the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia. But my number 2 pick is Mud. Probably the most reviewed movie here on this channel, or at least the movie I've mentioned the most. In fact, people complained so much a couple of years ago I had to retire it. This is probably the first time I've mentioned Mud in a couple of years here on the channel, or at least the first time I've actually included it on a list. If you've somehow never seen this movie, it's an amazing drama starring Matthew McConaughey with a bunch of exciting elements as well. You've also got an incredible supporting cast featuring Michael Shannon, Reese Witherspoon, Sam Shepard, and this movie featured one of, if not Ty Sheridan's first roles. He plays a young boy in this movie and is definitely the main character. And he's a latchkey kid. He spends all his time playing in the woods and on the river. And one day he finds kind of this hobo type character living out on this island in the middle of the Mississippi. They become friends, the boy tries to help him, but McConaughey's character is named Mud for a reason. He's actually in a lot of trouble, and the story here runs pretty deep. But at the same time, this is just a well-rounded drama that has a broad appeal. I know a lot of people really enjoy this movie, which is why I get so excited to recommend it. I'm happy to see it available on Tubi, but don't forget, it's not really available anywhere else right now. My number one pick is, though, it's available a lot of other places. And even though it's got a 99% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, it's probably one of the least known movies on this list. Starred Up. In this movie, Jack O'Connell plays a rough young man who gets thrown in the slammer, where he gets to spend some quality time with his father, played by Ben Mendelsohn. Both of them are fantastic in this movie, and what makes Starred Up stand out as a prison movie is just how raw and realistic it feels. I mean, prison movies, it's a genre all its own, and Starred Up, for a movie from 2013, feels incredibly raw. Like, if you've ever seen shows like Locked Up, Starred Up feels a lot like that. So, you got a hard-edge prison flick with some amazing performances and a top-notch director. This is directed by David Mackenzie, who would go on to do Hell or High Water next, which I like even more than this one. So just a banger of a prison flick. If you've never seen it, hopefully you found some amazing stuff to watch on this list. Thanks to Sundays for sponsoring another video. Don't forget to check out their link in the video description below. But I will keep making these videos as long as y'all keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special Tubi list, and you will see me on the next one.